Back of the Pack Ultra Guy. This is going to be a fun one. I've got Erin Quinn on the podcast, and before we started recording, we were just playing the "Do you know this person" game. We might have been at the same race at the same time game. Oh my gosh, you know so and so. So it's been fun to catch up a little bit with Erin and get to know her a little bit. But I'm really excited to share her story. I've been following her on Instagram, and I think this is going to be a good one for the masses. So without further ado, we have Erin Quinn on today. And Erin, we just like to start off by just, how did you find running? And were you active as a kid?
Sure.
Kind of where did it start?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really enjoying what you're doing and the content you're putting out, because I think there's this feeling, I've had this feeling that I'm kind of late to the party when it comes to ultras, and all of your interviews or many of your interviews have involved people that started a little bit later, on in their lives. And I think they all have very powerful stories. And I just really appreciate you interviewing the Back of the Pack, because as a lot of people say, that's where all the great stories are.
It's a place that doesn't get much attention as far as stories, but there are so many amazing people out there that just are out there for so long, and yeah, I think that there's a lot of great content that people have for their life stories. But yeah, I appreciate your kind words. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I grew up, and I still live in New Paltz, New York, which is about an hour and a half north of the city, and it's a very popular endurance area because we have a state park and a lot of preserves, and we're in the Shwangung Mountains, which is just south of the Catskill Mountains. So just some great training ground for running. There's a whole series of trails and a network of carriage roads, like antique sort of Victorian carriage roads, and
Wow.
and lots of sky lakes. So it's a big running community, cycling community, and swimming community. So I was lucky enough to grow up. I would say I got introduced to trail running at about 15 years of age with a group called the Shwangung Runners, and they were just crazy, a bunch of middle-aged billy goats. And now I'm one of them, and I fell in love with it. So that's how I got started. And then fast forward, I had 3 kids. I am a full-time journalist and a full-time swim coach. So my own running journey kind of took a back seat for a long time. I mean, I would get out there and do the local turkey trot 5K with the baby jogger, but I certainly was not hitting the trails or doing any longer distances. So I would say probably around maybe 2020, 2019, I started getting back on the trails. And by 2022, I'm a journalist, so I'd interviewed enough ultra runners to know what it was. But I thought, God, that is something I would love to try. And I did my first ultra in March of 2022 in Moab, and it was called Behind the Rocks by a company called Mad Moose, great family-owned trail race company, and that was the beginning of the ultra journey in 2022.
So that's interesting. You said you interviewed enough ultra runners to know what it was. What kind of journalism brings you to interview the ultra athletes?
Well, I'm mostly a regional journalist that has to cover everything from crime to politics to endurance sports to kind of evergreen stories. And I'm always looking for things that I'm curious about. And obviously, I love the outdoors. I love nature. And I was just fascinated by these people that I heard. There was a man named Jay Friedman. He has a podcast called The Pain Cave, which is great. And he had done the Leadville 100. This is probably 10 years ago. And I saw the big belt buckle, and I was just fascinated learning about, he slept in an oxygen tent and how he trained. And the fact that anyone could run 100 miles, not only that, but do it at altitude. And
Mm.
so, yeah, there's a lot of runners here, and there's many ultra endurance athletes in the area where I live. So I just kind of would get curious and ask them questions.
Interesting. That's pretty fascinating that you started younger, hanging out with this running club on the trails. Life, life changes a little bit, so you weren't running, but then you start getting back into it, interviewing as a journalist, interviewing ultra athletes. That's pretty exciting. Getting the inside the baseball, so to speak, with some of these people. Um, so that first race back, I don't know much about that race. Can you tell us a little bit more about that race, the Mad Moose race that you did in Moab?
Sure. So I had never really been to a national park, even though I love the outdoors and I'm always outside and on the trails here. But during COVID, it was the only time I could really afford it. I flew my three kids and I out there to Moab, and we hiked and went to Arches and to Canyonlands, and I mean, it's such a magical place. It's like the place I've ever seen. So when I first decided to do an ultra, I found Behind the Rocks in Moab, and we flew out again, and it was an out and back, and they had various distances. I think 50K was the longest distance, but as we were there, a heat wave came in, and they were putting out alerts to make sure the runners. They said they're going to check to make sure we have 40 ounces of water, and it's going to be 98 degrees, fully exposed in these canyons. And I got so nervous. I didn't have a hydration pack. I didn't know anything, so I just had a regular backpack, and I threw a bunch of like water bottles in there, and I had the worst chafing. But I did it. It was hard because of all the things they said. And then the following year, I did the 50-miler out there called Dead Horse Ultra, another one that they put on, which was in November, much cooler. And I think I enjoyed that one a lot more.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably a lot nicer weather, and you already might know the area a little bit now, the trail, if that same course overlaps the first one. So you did the 50 mile the next year. And what year would that have been? 2021?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. So we've
Well,
done the 50.
I'll do a little timeline. So, yeah, Moab, the Behind the Rocks was 2022. Dead Horse 50 miler was November of 2022. And then we come into my first 100 miler in Zion. Actually, I'm wearing the shirt.
Yeah. And what a beautiful place to do a 100 miler. I've never done any of those ultras that they put on, but they just look amazing.
Yeah. I mean, people say, well, we have such great terrain here. Why do you travel to go? And it's just, I love where I live, and I love training here, but there's something so nourishing about going to a place as beautiful as Zion or Moab that's different. And that really is kind of, what feeds me when I'm out there trying to push myself to that extent. I mean, just the absolute beauty. I kept looking around and saying, I'm so lucky to be here. And that helps when you're tired.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's something we do lose when we're doing some longer events, that, you start to get in a pain cave, or you start to get in this mood, maybe however you want to call it. And you stop for a minute and you go, oh my gosh, look at where I am, like you're overlooking Zions, and you're just like, how could I be having a bad moment right now? This is an amazing place. But you can lose sight of that. I mean, I've done it. Maybe I'm the only one, but you can lose sight of where you are and take it all in. I like how you pointed that out. So about the 100 miler, you're on a very fast trajectory. Let's call that out. You did your first one, then a 50, and then you jump right into the 100. That's a good quick trajectory. How did that go at Zion's?
Yeah. All the things I mean, what my education was interviewing a lot of ultra runners, listening to Trail Runner Nation, TRN. They're kind of the OGs of the ultra running podcast. And I'm just curious. So I read everything I could and I listened to everything I could. And obviously I interview people, but man, there's nothing like doing it yourself. I mean,
Mm.
it got tough. The first maybe 50 miles were great, and then the nausea, the vomiting, all of it, getting dizzy.
Oh,
So it got really hard, but I think gratitude was what carried me through. Just saying, I'm so grateful for the cloud coverage because we're in more of a desert setting. I'm so grateful for this beautiful sunrise in the morning. Just always having gratitude helps me to keep going. And it went well. I finished, a lot of vomiting. My whole body swelled up. It was rough traveling back to New York. But, within a few weeks, I was putting my name in for the lottery for the Moab 200. Yeah, there was some crazy climb called the Mondo Z, and it literally, I just felt like I was gonna fall backwards, into I don't know, into the bottom of a canyon, and I would be grateful for having just like one pinyon pine branch to hold on to and hoist myself up. Um, so yeah, I finished that, and I was thrilled to death to finish it, and was very sick. Had all the kind of aftermath of the first 100. I couldn't eat for days. I was swollen. It was tough. But then a few weeks later, I just threw my name into the lottery for the Moab 240, and I got
wow.
picked. So that was exciting.
Oh my gosh. How crazy. You come off your first 100,
It's
randomly throw
crazy.
your name into the hat for Moab and you get it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's so wild.
And I get it.
Oh,
I'm like, oh Lord, what have I done? What have I
yes,
done? Yeah.
exactly. Okay, let's pause real quick. So you just finished your 100.
Yeah.
You put your name in there, you get selected. What does that feel like? I just can't imagine because I'm sure you might have thought like, oh, I'd like to, 250, 240. Wow, that's crazy. I'd love to do that someday. But what did that feel like when you actually got picked so soon after your race? What was going through your mind?
Just like, oh my God, what have I done? It was like I was, whenever you enter something, you want to be chosen, right? You want to win the raffle. And I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
chosen. And I'm like, wait, so my prize is to run 240 miles in a loop around Moab. Have I lost my mind? Yeah, I didn't tell anyone for a long time because it was
Wow.
it was quite a daunting thing.
Oh, wow. So please, I'd love to hear about that because but there's so much that goes into this because, for people not, people who are just getting into the sport who are listening, I mean, it's one thing to train for 100, but it's a whole other ball game to train for a 200. There's so many more logistics. There's so much more involved with a
Oh
200,
yeah,
multi-day. For a 200 miler, depending on how fast you are, you might be out there,
yeah,
one night. But a 200, boy, there's a lot that goes
right.
into it. So I'd love to hear about that build up into the race.
Yeah. Well, I made some mistakes, which are kind of funny, but I also had put my name in for the Bear. One of the ultra runners,
Mm.
his name is Phil Vondra. He's also the co-host of that podcast, The Pain Cave. He had always said, "Oh, the Bear is one of the most beautiful races. It's in Utah. It goes through the Wasatch Mountain Range." And I put my name in there, and I think it was before the Bear had a lottery. So I'd already gotten into the Bear, and then I got into Moab. But the problem was the Bear was only 12 days before Moab.
What?
So yeah, it was 12 days before Moab.
What?
And I told the people that love me, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. That's crazy. Who would be that crazy? But I never actually took my name off. I never wrote in, and they kept sending emails like you can defer and get 75% back, you can get 50% back, and I just wouldn't defer it. I wouldn't take my name out. And finally, I just decided I'm going to wing it. I'm going to try it. And so I did the bear, which was probably to this day the hardest race I've ever done.
Hmm.
And then 10 days later, or 12 days later, I had Moab. But yeah, I guess the bear was my training. But I think you mentioned DFL. I think I was second to DFL. It was so painful. You know, I come from, sea level, and for me, a big run is 1,200 feet of gain, and that race I believe has over 20,000 feet of gain. And here I think like, oh, I did hill repeats, and I remember pulling up to the race check-in and looking at that mountain range, the Wasatch, and just thinking, oh my God, like these are really mountains. Like what
Yeah.
what I train on are little ant hills, and these are mountains. So
I
that
wanted
was
to talk
wild.
about
And Mike
that.
McKnight was there.
At some point, I
Yeah,
wanted
Mike
to bring
McKnight
that
was
up.
there. He was very helpful.
That's incredible that you still did it. What that does. That's why I wanted to bring it up. Is I have a guest. I had a guest on who was a friend named Brad Finn. He lives in Long Island, and when he trains, he tries so hard to get all this vert, but he still goes out and smashes all these big races.
Yeah.
So same thing to you. That's amazing. Even whatever vert training you can do and what you got in, you didn't let it stop you. You still went out and did the bear, and then Moab's no joke either. That's not a walk in the park elevation wise. So that's
No,
amazing.
no. Well, thank you.
So
It got ugly. I mean, I went out hard, and I was marching up these hills, and I was bombing the downhills, all the things you shouldn't do. And then at about mile 45, everything hit me: the altitude, the nausea,
yeah,
and I had never used poles. And so I got to my crew person, and he had met somebody who was familiar with the bear, and I said, my legs aren't working, I'm nauseous, I don't feel good. And the guy that he had kind of made friends with said, grab your poles. And it was the first time I'd ever used poles. And thank God he said that, because you hear about quads blowing out, but I didn't know what it was until the bear.
Mhm.
Like my legs did not work, so the poles became my legs. And yeah, I just was determined. I'm like, I'm gonna finish this thing. I think they give you 36 hours to finish, and I thought at some point that I don't know if I'm going to finish by the 36 hours, but it's point to point. You start in Utah and you end in Idaho. And I'm like, I'm going to finish the race. I'm going to get to the finish line. I don't know how and I don't know when, because my legs were so blown out that I just kept falling. I was just falling. I was black and blue from head to toe.
Oh my
Runners were
gosh.
laughing. They were like, oh boy, you must love the trail. You're taking some of it home with you. And I just, so when someone says what's hard, that was definitely the hardest race I've ever done.
That's incredible.
Because I think I was just crazy enough to try it.
Yeah, and help me understand. You you're flying out to the West Coast for all this stuff, and so did you fly
Yeah,
back home in between the Bear and the Moab, or did you stay out west?
I did.
Jeez.
I flew back home. I mean, it would have been great, to have, but like I said, I'm a swim coach and a journalist, so the journalism I can do somewhat remote. Obviously, I can't do swim coaching remote. So yeah, I had to fly out, fly back out, and then yeah, I basically just had to rest from the bear on out, because I wasn't doing well after the bear.
Yeah, I was going to say, talk about you're tapering into Moab, but you do the 100, a really hard 100 miler. I'm sure I would hope you just sat down for that period of
Yeah,
time and didn't move.
yeah,
So
I know.
now when you went back out from Moab, like we alluded to earlier, that logistically that's a whole new animal with the multi-day, and if you had a crew, and there's so much that goes into a
Yeah.
200. I'd love to hear about that trek back west. You just came back from there, but the trek back west, and I'd love to hear about that race, because that's incredible how close together those two were.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very generous word. I would just say stupid. Like, it was definitely not a bright move. But yeah, but I think in retrospect, the bear ended up serving as my governor. I learned the
Mm.
hard way that altitude really is altitude, and I'm not, being a lowlander, it's going to impact me very intensely, and that you don't, get to a downhill, you know, in 100-mile race and start bombing it because you're going to blow
Hmm.
your legs out. So all of those things really, in retrospect, were very helpful going into Moab. I was a lot less cavalier going in,
Mm.
and I don't know if I would have actually made it through Moab had I not had the lessons from the bear.
Interesting.
So in a lot of ways, yeah, I think the bear did help prepare me in this, in not in a training sense, more mentally, to realize, like, hey, altitude is no joke, New Yorker, and elevation is no joke, and we have to pace these things out a little bit better.
That makes sense. That's interesting.
So yeah,
Um,
it was a lot of moving parts getting to Moab. When I signed up for it, the one thing I knew, it was just intuition. I'd heard about pacers and crew, and my boyfriend has always been so kind to crew me at all these races. But I just said, pacer, like, I'm going to need a pacer for this. And I went back to my childhood. I said, the one person I really know who could do this, her name is Shiloh. And she was in the Schwangunk runners with me as a kid, and we ran cross country together. And she would always run barefoot. And her lifestyle is one where she bikes to work, and she snowshoes to work, or she runs to work. And her
wow.
lifestyle is just very active, and she's very comfortable on the mountains. And I thought, that's what I need. And so I felt like I got my dream prom date. I asked her, and she took off from work, and she came out and brought her sister with her to both pace me.
Wow. Because that, you know, again, for people who aren't familiar with 200s, and I mean, this is you, what you're asking someone to do is essentially take a week off of work, maybe less, but
Yeah.
essentially a
Yep.
week off of work and say, will you come hang out with me in the middle of nowhere for a week while I try and finish this thing? So it's a
Yeah.
huge ask, and that's amazing that you dipped into a childhood resource, and that she comes and brings her sister. That's
Yeah.
amazing. How cool.
Yeah.
So when what
It was
what
very, it was very cool.
I'd like to have you kind of talk a little bit about the race itself, and the pacers and the crew, and how that
Yeah.
went out. I think a lot of people, when they talk about the 200, they really don't talk about the logistics of it. So if you could kind of talk about that as well, and just kind of help people understand really what goes into this whole thing, because it's quite an ordeal.
Yeah. And that part, for the runners out there, I definitely feel more overwhelmed, or I have felt more overwhelmed by trying to organize crew and pacers than the actual training. Like, that's a whole nother thing, if you're not a professional, is to, like you said, it's a huge ask to find people that want to do it, that are able to do it, and to get a crew, which, especially in the 200s, is is really critical, I think, to success. And I really believe it's a whole nother sport to have these 200 plus distances with no crew. A lot of people know Andy Glaze, but the
Hmm.
Andy Glazes of the world who are going out there with no crew, no pacers, that's a whole different sport to me. I mean,
Yes.
that should be like an ultra sign up. That should be on a different list
Yes.
because that
I
really is, I besides through hiking, where you're really, unsupported through hiking, you're really out there with just yourself, and you're relying so much on those amazing volunteers. So I wanted
mhm.
to just give a shout out to anyone who does that, because my ultimate goal is to be able to do that. I'm not there yet, but it's a whole different animal.
No, I agree 100% with you. I did Sedona Canyons this last year, or this year, excuse me, unassisted, no crew, no pacers. And so it's just the back half of Cocodona. And it was so hard mentally, and it's just a whole different ball game. And I don't think enough respect is
Yeah,
given to those completely unassisted. I know they get assistance with aid, but like unassisted, no crew, no pacers. Those
right.
guys and gals out there. I mean, when I did Cocodona, towards the finish, I met a gal. She had no cruiser pacers. She's all just out there, got it done by herself. And
Yeah.
I remember thinking the whole time talking with her as I'm hearing her tell her story, going, "This lady is so dang tough. How did she do that?" So I think it,
But
it it should get its own category almost. But sorry, I didn't mean to
yeah.
take your story over. But yes, I completely agree with you.
No, no, I agree with you. I remember seeing Andy Glaze actually at Cocodona. I think it was Fort Tuttle, and he had gone hypothermic, and he's lying there with a blanket wrapped around him. And I just thought, at Cocodona, I had two people. I had my boyfriend and my oldest son, and I just always I looked forward to seeing them. It just helped me during those really dark moments. And I'm thinking, obviously, these people have people that love them in the world, but they're not there, and that just takes a certain kind of inner strength that I would love to develop one day. I'll get there, hopefully.
No, it's a real thing.
But yeah, so
I'm
back to
glad you
Moab.
called it out.
So Moab, so Shiloh and her sister Jessie, who I also knew from childhood, we also ran cross country together. They came out, and my boyfriend flew out, and then my two sons drove a van out. So we had a van. My two sons were part of the crew. Jessie and Shiloh were part of the crew. They were pacing me, and my boyfriend Kip. So I had five people, which
Wow.
at first I was so nervous and oh my God, this is so much to ask of people and what if I don't finish? I mean, those are much more of my fears than the actual running of it. Because the actual running of it, that's on me. But having those people out there and the kind of person that I am, I felt so much pressure. And not that they were putting it on me, but I definitely felt it.
Yeah, that is true. There is that added pressure because you almost have like an audience now, and they've committed so much time, and it's like, oh, I got to get this done. I got to do it right. I got to make it happen because I hate just to turn around and say, oh, hey, first aid station. I had a bad race. It's over. There's so much effort that's gone in outside of yourself. So I completely understand where you're coming from
Yeah.
there
But
because
the
I
great thing
I
about
felt the same
Moab, I
way.
have to say, oh God, you just want to make sure that everyone's happy and they're having a good time. But my friend Sylvander pointed out that once the race starts, he said within 24 hours you're going to be feral and you're not even going to think about it. And that really happened. Like
Yeah.
I kind of got to the start line, and we had all talked as a crew, and I had said I'm going to do my very best. And everyone was okay. Like if something happened, you could roll an ankle, you could break something, a lot of things could happen. We're just going to stay in Moab and all have a great vacation and go hiking. So we were in a place where I felt like if something went wrong and these people had taken time out of their lives, we were somewhere that they're all outdoorsy and they would all enjoy. So that helped put me at ease. And then yeah, right before the start, that's a come to Jesus moment right there. I mean, you have this big pack on. There's your crew. It's 12 o'clock. The sun is hot, and there's Sally McRae, one of my heroes, in front of me, and I just kind of tapped her, and she turned around. And I said, Sally, my name is Erin, and I just want to thank you for being you. You've provided me with a lot of inspiration. And she said, oh, can I hug you? I was like, of course you can. And there's a lot of you know I call them stars. I'm doing a lot of fangirling in the beginning, but when Candace starts doing the pledge, if I get lost, get hurt or die, it's my own damn fault. That's a moment, and you have to say like I'm gonna go out on the trail. What I say to myself is I'm gonna go out on the trail with a ton of love in my heart, and I'm going to try to bring joy out to the trail and just bring light out to the trail. And that's all I can do because it's really all you can do.
I love that. That's you've found a place in within yourself, and I'm going to give whatever I can give, and I'm going to focus on what I can focus on, and just have gratitude in my heart.
Right.
And whatever's going to happen happens, and I'm going to control what I can control. I guess that's why that resonates so much within me. Is I agree with you 100%. And I think sometimes we start to focus on things that are out of our control. You know, oh my gosh, there's
Right.
clouds coming. Oh my gosh, you know, I
Yeah.
I it's I might have forgot my sunblock. It's like, or whatever, right? We get so focused on the most random
Right.
things, intra race, and you're like,
Yep.
oh, okay, you did forget your sunblock. You can't do anything about it. Your crew might have some. Don't worry about it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So your race starts. You're going along. How did it go? Now, keep in mind, you just came off 100, so I can't wait to hear this story of how this went, because this is such an amazing story,
Yeah.
Aaron. I'm so
Another thing
excited
was
you're sharing
great.
this.
Well, I mean, a lot of ultra running is TMI, but I met with a medical. You have to do all these checkpoints, which I think are really great for the 200s. They want to check your gear. They want to check to make sure you've
Yeah.
downloaded the course map on a Gaia app on your phone. So I think
Hmm.
all of that is really critical. And then I had a talk with the medical personnel, and he asked me about what ultras have I done, and I talked to him and said, after the bear, my pee was dark brown, coffee colored, and he said that,
Hmm.
and he said that's not good. You were going into rhabdo, like you need to
Yeah.
drink. And I was almost embarrassed, like I didn't go out at the bear trying to hurt myself. But what happens in these races is, you with altitude, with dehydration, with not having enough food in your system, your mind doesn't always work well. So it was good for me to have that talk with him and to have my pacers hear it. And I just said, okay, this is a real lesson in self care. So I want to do hard things, and I want to go out there and challenge myself. I don't want to harm myself. That's not the idea. So it was, I went out there, like I said, with a lot of joy in my heart. And Moab is so wildly beautiful. And I just was, I guess, yeah, made friends, was grateful, had a lot of good talks along the way. And I just needed to make it to mile 114 before I pick up a pacer. And one of the reasons why is that what makes Moab I believe, one of the more challenging races that I know of is that you can pick up a pacer at mile 70, but they have to stay with you for 50 miles.
Hmm.
And so my two pacers, as wonderful and as competent as they were, they didn't feel they didn't feel good about saying I can pace 15 miles. They weren't ultra runners. They were through hikers and they were runners and they're trail runners, but they had never done an ultra. So I said, no, I've done 100 miles by myself. Let me get to mile 114, which was the next place I could pick up a pacer, and then they would trade off. One was more comfortable in the mountain sections, and one more comfortable in the desert sections. And so that's what we did. But yeah, getting up, there's a climb that you do up to Shame Mountain. So from mile 90 to mile 114, that was a really dark time, and I kept just praying. What I do is I just pray, however people want to, interpret that, but I just pray to, my higher power, to God, which is more of a transcendental type of prayer. It's more of a prayer to nature to help me, because it was very hard to find your way in a lot of places in Moab that it's not marked very aggressively. And there were these huge climbs. I was going up to Shame Mountain, probably over 8,000 feet, and not having been altitude trained, it was tough. So I came in pretty war torn at mile 114, but there was my crew. There were my boys and my two pacers and my boyfriend, and I never felt so happy in my life to see those five people.
I love it. That's awesome. And I like how you talked about prayer. And we don't have to highlight any particular belief at all, but this idea that something outside of yourself, you're communicating with something outside of yourself for help, and you're
Yeah,
eliciting gratitude to uh, this
yeah.
thing outside of you, and you're saying, "Hey, I really need you." I'm.
A lot of course markings, and altitude was really getting to me. And I did all the things that you probably shouldn't do. Is I probably had stopped eating and drinking at that point. I was cold, but I just wanted to get to the aid station. And that's where, when people talk about hallucinations, that was the first time I started hallucinating. And it's not hallucinations. I knew I was hallucinating, which would take a while. I saw, a man with a beer belly stacking up beer cans, and then I saw a bunch of skateboarders coming down, and it just started to get a little bit scary. So that was also, I was so happy to see my crew, and my daughter at the time was studying abroad in Greece, and I was, pretty out of it that I thought that she was there and she wasn't there. So basically I needed to crawl in the van and go to sleep.
Yeah, sounds like it. When you start seeing your daughter who isn't crewing with you, you go, all right, let's take a break. Nap time, real quick.
Yeah.
Well, that
That time. It was
it's
that time.
yeah, and
So,
again, for people who are just getting into the sport, and you know one of the things with the sleep is, and Erin, correct me if I'm wrong here, but at least for me, when you go lay down, you don't just totally zonk out. I mean, maybe 15, 20 minutes, maybe an hour if you had a really quiet spot. Like, you're not just,
yeah.
like, your body, even after the race, it doesn't want to, like, totally rest. So even just 15 minutes, it
Yeah.
totally is a game changer, at least for me. So I don't know about your experience
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
sleep and the multi-day.
Well, it's a thing which, I love listening to ultra running podcasts, and it's a thing that no one quite has figured out, or it seems people are still, there's not a lot of science behind it because we're doing a real niche sport, and it's kind of hard to test us when we're
Yeah.
out, out of service in the mountains somewhere. But yeah, I knew that sleep was important. You know that it's important, but I think what people don't understand, like my crew was kind of aggravated with me because, in a loving way, they said, you're going too fast. You need to sleep. I think the first time I could sleep was mile 70, and I tried, but what happens for me when I try to sleep is that the minute you stop, you feel all of the pain. Like the
Mm,
pain is so intense, all the inflammation, all the aches, that it's hard to go from relentless forward motion to stopping. You don't just, for me, I don't just close my eyes and go to sleep. And there's also a lot of adrenaline. You're out in the trail, so you're having a lot of gel and Coke and sugar, and your
yep.
body is so mixed up that I wish it was as easy as just turning off the switch for whatever time you allotted. I'm going to sleep for 30 minutes, but it doesn't work, or at least for me, it hasn't worked that way.
Yeah. No, you're right. Great points across the board. You're not eating normal. You're definitely not sleeping normal. You're not exercising normal. Your body is so screwed
Mm-mm.
up. It has no idea what's happening. And
So messed up.
yeah, I'm lucky
Yeah,
enough that I can do quick naps, and I took a few longer stints when
right.
I had done a multi-day event. But I just feel blessed in that way because I
Yeah,
know a lot of people can't. They try and lay down and they just cannot sleep.
yeah,
So
yep.
you start
Yeah, and that was it.
hallucinating. Uh,
That was rough.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that
I started
the
hallucinating.
sleep
It
deprivation.
was it's very cold,
Hmm.
but I love cold. Sleep deprivation is rough. It's just, but you knew it. Like I guess with the hallucinations, you start to see them coming. Like you catch yourself and you go, okay, I need to sleep. I was able to sleep there, got up, and that's when I had my first pacer, Shiloh, and the sun was rising. We were in the Shame Mountains. It's fall in these Utah in these mountains, outside of Moab, and there's quaking aspens. It's like
Oh,
they're like
nice.
beautiful gold, silver dollars quaking everywhere. There's snow on the ground. I mean, the beauty. Like I said, every time I thought I couldn't go another step, the beauty was really the nourishment. And so, yeah, off we went, and Shiloh would do the mountain sections, and my friend Jesse would do the desert sections. And I was moving along pretty well, and then we got to about mile. I'm gonna spitball it here. Maybe mile 180. I think it was called Road 96, and we needed to hike up into the La Salle Mountains, which are, pretty primitive up there. And I tried to sleep again. didn't go so well. And off Shiloh and I went, and I think the heat was really extreme, and everything started misfiring. I started crying. I missed my daughter. I started vomiting. I started hallucinating. Then I started shivering. And just as we were getting close to Pole Canyon, in the middle of nowhere, a pickup truck appears. And I didn't know if I was hallucinating it, or if it was there. And it was a pickup truck. We couldn't figure out how it got up there because these are just rutted out old Jeep roads and trails. And it was a hunter. And he said, you seen any elk? And I and I was just horrified. I was like, I haven't seen any elk here. And Shiloh said, no, we haven't seen any elk. And he's like, you sure you ain't seen any elk? And I was like, no, I haven't seen any elk since the Abajo Mountains. And he's like, well, I ain't going all the way to fuck over there. And I said, okay. And then he looked at us and he laughed. And all Shiloh said was like, it should be mandatory for women to have pacers out here because, we're all alone out here and that guy has a gun. And something about her saying that, everything that could go wrong went wrong. Like I went into full blown panic attack. And so that was rough. And it wasn't about, like, I didn't think the elk hunter was trying to kill us. It was just my body went past that point. And so sleep deprivation, the heat, the exhaustion, the being a little bit frightened by a kind of a hunter in the middle of the woods, it all started to get really dark. And I really give props to her and to the aid station medic who just said, you can rest a little bit, but then you have to push on because you don't want to be in the La Salle Mountains when it's, 0 degrees. This is going to be a long push and you kind of have to go. Good. So I don't want to make light of it. There were really hard moments. Yeah, smart medic, but there were some really hard moments that we had to push through. And I don't think, as much as I jumped into the 240, pretty quickly, I think that some part of me was really blessed and maybe just being intuitive and being very fortunate to get Shiloh and Jesse because I think, I don't know if that I could have finished that without them. Those were some hard times where I kind of needed someone to take the lead in the night in the Abajos and in La Salle. It was definitely a little bit scary.
Yeah, well, especially I was fortunate enough when I started to dip my toe into the 200s to crew and pace my friend twice at Cocodona. So I kind of had an idea what it looked like.
Oh, wow.
I've got a pretty close relationship with this individual. Yeah. We've spent hours and hours together. So I'm getting a front row view of what's going on. So I can't imagine not having seen that and really kind of missing those cues that you do pick up on when you crew pace somebody that many times. And you're like, oh, here's the section where it's really tough. Or here's the area that's going to be really bad. Or, I did, trying to get him to sleep because you don't realize that that's a big thing until you actually try and get some runner to sleep. You don't think about that kind of stuff. So you got through it. You finished. What did that taste like? The finish?
Yeah.
So close to the 100-miler that you just smashed a 240. I'd love to hear about that.
Well, it was in the middle of the night. It's so funny because you imagine in your mind this triumphant finish. Like, yes, you're crossing the finish line, but it's not a marathon. There are not thousands of throngs of supporters lining the roads. It's you and your crew, a few other runners, and some really exhausted volunteers making pizza. It's not very glamorous. Like my best friends who are not runners always joke with me that, ultra running is not a vanity sport. You look like an unhoused individual. You're covered in dirt and cow manure that you fell in and you've been sick and you haven't washed, it's not glamorous, but it did feel good to finish. And and it certainly takes a week or two to start putting the pieces back together. I didn't crash out and sleep. I was swollen from head to toe again for some reason. Blisters all over my feet. It took a good 2 weeks to to be able to eat, sleep, and have my mind kind of right again.
Yeah, the recovery for the 200s is fairly intense. At least for me it was. So it sounds like for you it
Yeah.
was similar. It doesn't come easy. These guys and gals that go do multiples in a year, I just don't even understand that at this point. Maybe someday in my life I'll understand that more.
No,
But
there's
yeah,
nothing given. There's nothing given.
yeah, it's insane to
Nothing
me.
is given in those races.
Um, and Erin,
Yeah, my
you
friend Shiloh
mentioned.
was really funny.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, my friend Shiloh was funny because I didn't know what I looked like really, and I
Um,
said, her son is on my swim team, and I said, well, we were flying out the next day, and I said, well, I got to get home. I have to coach a 4-day swim meet, and she said, Erin, you need to find someone else to coach. And I said, why? I'm still walking. I can coach. She goes, you're going to scare the children. Like, you don't look like yourself.
you're
Like,
gonna
kids
scare
are
the
used to seeing you a certain way. If you walk in with all these
children.
blisters, my lips were swollen, I had cuts everywhere. It's like, you're going to terrify them. I'm like, okay, I will get another coach.
Oh, that's the best thing I've heard all day. You're gonna
Yeah,
scare the children.
yeah. I was like, yeah, I'm pretty freaking scary looking right now.
Yeah. Oh man. So, what I did want to ask you about is we have a mutual
Yeah,
connection with Greg Sacatero. You mentioned that you had
yes.
met him at Tahoe. I'd love to hear about that because obviously you've gone on to do other things. The
Right.
Tahoe. I know you've done Cocodona, and I'm gonna put a pin in it, but I want to know what's next. But I'd love to hear more about that, just because um, you know he's an amazing individual, but you're right alongside there with him. You are an amazing individual too. You've done all these great events, and you're
Oh,
doing all
thank
these
you.
great events. So I'd love to hear um, how you guys met, and then a little bit more about Tahoe, if you don't mind.
No, these are all great questions. So, I think similar to you, I was at Cocodona, and I had one pacer for a couple of sections in Cocodona, but it was much more bare bones in Moab. So it was my boyfriend and my son Seamus, and I had a pacer who was kind enough, a friend from New York, who came in for a few of the sections later on. But I would say the majority of it I was by myself, and I was just really taken um, at at Cocodona by how many indigenous runners there were. I just thought
Mm,
this is great. I just hadn't seen this many people of color, indigenous runners. There was a lot more diversity in the Cocodona runs, or in the Era Viper runs, I should say, than I had noticed before, and I was pretty taken by that. And I started to, at some point towards the latter half of the race, Greg and I must have been kind of running around the same pace, and I would see him, and you always think someone else is looking worse than you. I mean, maybe I looked really terrible too, but I would think, man, that guy looks rough. I hope that guy makes it out of that aid
yeah.
station. And then I would see this entourage. They'd wrap the Navajo blanket around him. Someone would treat his foot. Someone would be feeding him. And, they would just surround him. And the next thing I know, I'd be chasing him again, like in the next section. So the constant resurrections that he had were amazing to me. And when you're out there, there's really not much to do but kind of talk to some people on the trail if you're lucky enough to have someone next to you. Look at the scenery, think your own thoughts. But I paid a lot of attention to Greg and his crew, and there was something about them that was just magical to me. Like I said, he would come in looking broken, and they would patch him back up, and he would
Hmm.
go out looking strong for the next section. And so when I was looking at some of your podcasts and I saw the one with Greg, I said, wait a second, I recognize him. And I was so excited to learn more about him because that never left me, when he crossed the
Hmm.
finish line, and his entourage of indigenous pacers and crew members. And I learned through your interview that he was the first Indigenous person to do all four, the Grand Slam, Cocodona, and the Triple Crown. That he is vying for the 1,000-mile belt buckle at Cocodona. And what I loved about his interview is how much he was shouting out other Indigenous runners. Some from his tribe, some from other tribes, and I thought that was, I hadn't heard of these runners, and I thought that is wild. And so when I got to Tahoe, I didn't know I was going to meet Greg, but I could tell you about Tahoe. So here's a sleep story. I went out to Tahoe. I thought I'm going to do the Triple Crown. Got out there, was most worried about the elevation. Made it through the elevation, as well as I could. Got to mile 106 and had what they call that Tahoe lung, which I kind of poo-pooed. I'm like, the Tahoe lung, like, we're not coal miners, I'll survive. I've never had, an allergy, I'll be okay. And I could barely breathe by mile 106. Scary, so went to see the medic. She said, this is just what happens out here. The pollen's terrible. The granite dust is mixed with the pollen is really rough. Take some Mucinex, try to sleep. So I went to sleep in, it was just my boyfriend Kip out there, who was kind enough to crew me. I went to sleep in the car, which was about a half a mile away from the aid station. And when I finally fell asleep, I had never told him when the cutoffs were, because I was far enough ahead of the cutoff. But I actually fell asleep for about 5 hours. He finally opened the door, and an aid station volunteer was on his bike, and he said, do you have a runner in there? And he said, yeah. He's like, she just missed the cutoff by 10 minutes. And talk about a panic. I grabbed my vest, grabbed my poles. I was crying, and Kit felt terrible. Can she still? It's only 10 minutes. Can she? And he called, whatever, higher up, and they said no. The sweepers have already gone out. Dang. And I had a dark moment there. I was bawling, and he said to me, well, you can always volunteer. And I just had one of those moments, and I said, you know what, you got to turn this around. It's over. Like, you went 106 miles, you slept through. It's nobody's fault. It's not the volunteer's fault. It's not it's not Kip's fault. I was so out of it and sleep deprived, and my brain wasn't right. I didn't tell him when the cutoffs were. So what are you going to do? You're going to jump back in, and you're going to help other people, make that finish line. And that's what I did. And it was probably one of the best experiences I've ever had out there, was being a part of other people's races. And so, long story short, in that same parking lot, we went back to that, I think it was called the Village Green, if I'm not mistaken. We went back to the same aid station once I got some sleep, and volunteered there for the next 2 days. And that's where I met Greg. He was there, and he was pacing another native runner. And I went up to him, and I introduced myself, and I said, I heard you on the Back of the Pack Ultra Guy podcast. And he was delighted to talk. And he handed me his card and told me who he was pacing. And it was just a joy to meet him and get to talk with him.
Oh, he's, I don't want to turn this into, Erin's podcast into Greg's podcast, but I agree with you 100%. I mean, driving home after interviewing him on up in Pianta on the reservation, it was just, I was on a high. I mean, he's incredible. Yeah. His story's incredible. I don't know if you've heard about the ultra marathon up on the Navajo reservation called the Canyon de Chelly Ultra. It's an ultra that's held in the Canyon de Chelly on the Navajo reservation. And so if you and I went up there today, we would have to have a Navajo guide, take us around the canyon. But once a year at the Canyon de Chelly Ultra, your bib number is kind of like your permit. So you can go in the canyon without a Navajo guide, and you get to do this ultra, and you climb up, you go run through the canyon, you climb up to this Spider Rock aid station. So now you're up and out of the canyon, and you're seeing everything. It's an amazing thing. I'd encourage you to put your name into the lottery. it's one of the more kind of cult classic type ultras, um, because everybody who does it tries to do it again, and they put their name in over and over and over again to go back. It's just amazing. There's something
Oh,
special
wow.
about the Navajo nation and about just Native people in general and running. The way they view running. The
Yeah.
race director out there, he's a native Navajo. He lives in Chinle, right by the canyon. He's an amazing individual, but there is something special about native individuals and running, and they're amazing. There is something amazing about it. I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but they're just amazing individuals. Um, and the way that they view running is so special. Sean, the race director of the Canyon de Chelly Ultra, he
Yeah.
talks about it like praying. It's just so amazing to hear these stories. And I'm not trying to say the word amazing so much, but I just keep saying it because it was such a special experience. And I'm lucky enough to go back this year to
Yeah.
do that event again in October. But I'd encourage you to do it because it's so special to go out there. And I mean, I took this to the start line, and there was a bunch of native runners from Chinle, from I think the cross country team, or they had just graduated high school and they were going to NAU, and they were on the cross country team. And those individuals were
Yeah.
so unbelievably fast, and they knew the canyon so well because they'd grown up running in it. It was so impressive. But I mean, because it's an out and back, they
Yeah.
were coming back, and I hadn't even gotten to the turnaround point, and they were just totally smoking me. And I was so humbled and just grateful to be there and just to watch them go and how
Oh, yeah.
fast they were. It was a beautiful moment, and I'm excited to go back. But didn't mean to steal the show, but I just wanted to agree with you and relate with the whole meeting Greg and the experience that I had with him there. It was very special. Um, so we've done Tahoe. We had a DNF, but we volunteered, and that's amazing because not a
Yeah.
lot of people would do that. I
Oh, a
want to
little
point
bit.
that out. That is an amazing quality you have, Aaron, because I take DNFs kind of hard. And I've only had one, but I did take it hard. And I don't think I would have been in an appropriate enough mindset, at least immediately, to say, yes, I'm going to volunteer. So I want to commend you on that because that would be
Yeah.
difficult. That would be really tough. So we had that happen. You don't strike me as the type of individual who says, "Well, I've done. I've done Tahoe. I did have Tahoe. Did Cocodona. I've done this, and I'm just done now." So I'd love to hear what's next for you.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, DNFs are tough, um, and but I think my best friend, Kristen, she said to me, "This is going to make you a better coach," and she's so right.
Mm,
Because like we say, you can say it. Well, there's things I can't control, and this was something that it was nobody's fault. It happened. Things happen. But what I could control was my attitude. And that's what I always tell my swimmers. And so I had to step out of myself and go into service. And I think it was, I loved helping people realize their dreams, but it also helped me selfishly. I was out of myself. I couldn't wallow in, oh, poor me. We had to get these runners fueled and fed and their blisters
right.
taken care of and get them, dressed and back up and back out to, towards the finish line. So, but I appreciate you saying that. DNFs do really take a toll. At the same time, I think that's one of the best things that someone can do if they find themselves in that situation. It really helps the other runners and helps to turn it around. And then what's next is Bigfoot. Absolutely excited and
Yeah.
terrified, and yeah, I'll be
Awesome.
heading out there next week.
Oh my gosh. Man, you don't mess
So
around.
that's what's
I
next.
think for the record, no one is going to bet against Erin because she does not mess around. That is what I've learned in talking to you in a little bit more detail. Holy cow, that is so cool. Well, I'll be definitely watching you on the tracker.
For sure.
I am one of those weird individuals who
Oh,
tracks my
me
friends.
too.
I go, oh, what are they doing now? Oh my gosh,
Oh, me too.
it's so funny because it's just,
Who knew
it's
that
a
watching
dot.
a dot would be that
Yes,
exciting?
that's what I was just thinking. It's a dot on a screen, and we're like, yes, go, Aaron, go. You're doing so good. We know that you're the dot, so it it's something we like to watch. I know I enjoy following my friends when they're racing. It's just so special. And I like sending them a message. You're doing so good. Whether they get it or not, I don't know. But I like to do that also. And
I think it's awesome. I mean, I'm a big ultra fan as well. I'm a big fangirl. And I think for me, when I'm out there doing a race, a cowbell or a thumbs up or a good work, that to me is like getting a gel shot or pickle juice. It helps fuel
yeah,
me. So I love all the good energy, all the text messages, all the thumbs up from other runners. It really helps to get you through it. I mean, it's silly, but I love it. And one thing, you had said before we talked, what advice would you give to a newer ultra runner? And that was the one question I thought about because, obviously I'm not that, I'm only a few years into ultra running, but I would say that, you know what, like start where you are. It's not a gated community. Like there is room on
yes,
the trail for everyone. And, and just start where you are. And I love some of your stories of the people that you've chosen because they've started out, they've wanted to lose weight or they've had a medical condition or they just wanted to get in shape and they started, running the length of their driveway or running a mile and just start where you are and build slowly. And everyone is capable of doing this. I'm not special. Maybe you are special. I don't know, but I'm really not special. It really is just believing in yourself and getting out there and just taking that first step every day. And that's all you have to do. And there's no superpowers that you need besides believing in yourself and committing to just showing up every day.
yeah. I think that's beautiful, Aaron. I'm glad you weaved that in because I think sometimes as humans we think there's some type of special sauce that people have, and when we're looking at a successful person in
Yeah.
business or in life or spiritually kind of, we look at them as kind of a spiritual leader or something. We think there's a special sauce. There really isn't. It's just this determination and dedication and discipline that you choose to do. And like you said, start wherever you are. Be dedicated to walking the length of your driveway every morning. Hey, you're
Right.
making it happen. One of my guests, Andrew Main,
Yeah. Go walk your
he
dog
signed up.
around the block. Yeah.
Yeah, my Andrew Main, one of my guests, he signed up for the Moab 240, and he had no idea what he was even signing up for. He just knew that he wanted a huge challenge. He didn't even own a hydration vest. I mean, poles. He had no idea, but he knew
I
I'm
can
gonna
relate to
commit.
that.
Yeah, and when I commit, I'm just gonna put my head down and
Yeah.
train, and all those little things they'll come together, right? Learning about
Yeah.
poles, it's amazing. I love what you said. It it really spoke to me, and I think it'll speak to other people, especially people just getting started. Don't stop. You know, if you have a goal to
Uh-uh.
do a 50K and you can only go a mile,
A
don't
5K.
stop. Yeah, don't
Yep.
stop. Just keep training.
And
Keep
you're
going.
not late to the party. You're not late to the party. Like I
Yeah.
think people feel that, and I started ultra running when I was 50. One of my best friends, Amy, just finished her first 10K. I've been coaching her, and she started running in her 50s. And you're not late to any party. The trail is there for everybody, and I think we all, I just think you might not want to do a 240 miler because that takes a certain kind of crazy, but if you want to do a 5K or you want to hike a mountain or bag a peak, there's so many things that you can do. And it's just, you got to start with little steps because that's how any of us get through an ultra. It's just one step at a time.
Yes. Agree 100%. Well, Aaron, you've been so gracious with your time. The way you wrapped it up was beautiful. I don't think we could have scripted that better. I love what you said at the end. Your story's amazing, so thank you. One of the things I do with my guests is I want to send you a gift from Death March Running Company. So offline, I'll get the where you would
Oh,
like me to
wow.
ship it to. It's just a way to say thank you. Um, you know, your time is valuable. We've taken you away from your. Also, side note, shout out to Kip, the boyfriend Kip, because he's like dedicated. He's always there, crew chief extraordinaire. So shout out to Kip, by the way. Good job. High five to Kip.
Yeah.
But I'll connect with you offline and get
Thank
a
you.
size that you want and then the address. But again, thank you so much. This is great. And again, you're so gracious with your time. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kristen. What's next for you?
What's next for me? I'm trying to be a good father. I'm trying to keep going at work, and I'm trying to train at the same
Okay.
time. So I have Candy Deshay in October, and I also
That's in
have
Monday.
it's going to be amazing. I'm so excited, and I also have the Bradshaw Brute. It's
That's
the
awesome.
Aravaipa's new 100 miler on the
Oh,
Cocodona course. So it's a little
that looks
scary for me
phenomenal.
because it's like the bear. It's 20,000 feet of climb, 100 miles, no crew, no pacers,
Oof.
and you have 36 hours. So it's like I that's why I reached out to
Oof.
Lance to get
You
him
can
as a
do it. I
coach.
believe in you.
Yeah, because I was like, I need a coach. I need someone to kind of help me through this. I don't. I This is outside my breadth. I've really got to have someone push me. So I'm excited though. I'm excited. I appreciate you asking too. Thank you.
I'll be cheering for you.
You're so great. Well, Erin, again,
Yeah, I've
thank you
heard
so
about that
much.
race. It sounds like a beast, but
Yeah, I think
thank you,
there's like,
Kristen. Keep up all the great interviews and the great
yeah.
work you're doing.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you, Erin. I will, and I'll be looking forward to watching you at Bigfoot.
Okay.
Thank you
Have a
again.
great
Have a great
night.
night.